She lived in Burbank in 1940.
Wow, okay.
So 23 years of doing something.
Oh, excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi,
Ma'am.
Bob and Jocelyn.
Please join me in welcoming Wes Clark and Mike McDaniel.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
How about a big hand for Joan? She does a great job.
Welcome, Burbankers. This is the Lost Burbank slideshow, and I'm Wes Clark. That's McDaniel. I'm sorry, I didn't put your...
He forgot to put my first name. Oh, well, you know who I am.
But we're here to talk about this book that we've written about the common history that we all share as Burbankers.
Wes Clark, author number one here, was born in Los Angeles, attended Burbank schools, BHS class of 74. Anybody out there? Yeah, never mind. I have my little bulldog on. All right, we have one in the corner. Thank you. He's lived in Burbank until 1980, now lives in Northern Virginia. Anyway, he works for the Patent and Trade Office. He's interested in history and a lot of other stuff. He hosts 10 different websites. And was in the Marine Corps from 1974 to 1978. Webmaster of the Burbankia website, wrote Civil War reenacting articles for National Magazine, and managed 10 websites since 1996.
And that's what I looked like in 1974. These are our senior Burbank High pictures. This handsome fellow with the sideburns, born in Burbank, the Burbank Community Hospital, which no longer exists. He attended Burbank schools, also a graduate of the class of 1974, lived in Burbank his entire life. He works for the city reprographics department, interested in history, especially World War II, collects memorabilia, member of the Veterans Committee. If you've ever done any of the veterans activities, Memorial Day, whatnot, you've seen him. Assisted with the Burbank 100th Anniversary book, which we will be selling copies of. We have a few of those, by the way. And he is the head researcher of the Burbankia website, and he wrote the Burbank Veterans book, which you may find on the Burbankia website.
We would like to acknowledge tonight, and if any of the people from the Burbank Historical Society,
from Burbank Historical Society?
anybody, stick your hand up, feel free. There, we have one over there. Thank you very much.
Great.
They have been...
We always put in a plug for the Burbank Historical Society. This is where Burbank history lives. They've been doing the good work for many, many years, and many of the photos in Lost Burbank come from their archives.
Why Lost Burbank? First of all, the good news is we didn't go shopping the book. The publisher came to us and said, wow, you've got a lot of material.
And I've talked to other authors and they hate that.
Yeah, they don't like us or that. Anyway, initially we wanted to call it Burbankia, the book, but they have a Lost series in the publisher called Lost This City, Lost That City, so they felt our book would fit in there. The publisher of the History Press wanted it as part of their Lost series, and it describes things that are not here anymore in the book in Burbank, but by no means did we want a book that was depressing and downbeat.
Let me tell you about the Burbankia website. Almost everything in this slideshow is on it. There's the URL. You can Google Burbankia and find it that way. It's on wesclark.com. That's where you'll see all of my interests. It was created in December 2003, and it's been updated hundreds of times since then. We've got a whole lot of text files. There were 207 HTML pages. There's about 3,000 images. 15 complete books about Burbank history are there, laboriously transcribed from HTML, and 61 videos about Burbank, all associated with the Burbankia website. No advertisements. Okay. There's our book. This is what we're plugging today. We'll talk about Lost Burbank. The table of contents. Now, the structure of this slideshow is we're going to go through it chapter by chapter, and we'll have a couple of things that we'll talk about. It is not an all-encompassing slideshow because you need to read the book. There's a lot in the book. Chapter 1, Burbank's earliest days.
Burbank's founder, David Burbank. Now, I was watching a History Channel special about famous cities in America, and they mentioned Burbank, talking about Lockheed and stuff like that, and they made the grave error of saying that it was Luther Burbank who the city was named after. This is the History Channel. They're supposed to be experts. But no, and as you can see here, we have many portraits of David Burbank. Some of these have never been seen. The middle one was David Burbank's wedding wedding portrait. And anyway, you'll see how he looks pretty much similar in these. And then this is the statue at the five corners over there, which looks more like Lenin. And we're not so sure.
Not John Lennon.
No, and not John. We thought he was the guy whose picture they used to make this, but we were hoping that they would have gotten that one a little bit better up there, but they didn't.
But you can see that Dr. David Burbank was a gentleman with piercing blue eyes, deep-set eyes, and a rather distinguished receding hairline. And now, Burbank's early days. This picture is the Pacific Electric cars coming to town, looking up Olive Avenue. September 6th, 1911. Bells were rung, firearms were discharged in the city precincts. Can you imagine anybody doing that nowadays? If you've ever bought a record from Warner Brothers, you've seen this as the record label. This was the illustration used as the record label. How excited were Burbankers to learn about trolley car service coming to Los Angeles? Well, one contemporary poetess wrote in the Burbank Review, "Who said Burbank had a nap? Burbank is sure on the map." When was Burbank born again? December 27th, 1910. Watch us grow and see things hum. Whoop, hurrah, the trolley'll come.
Well, not a lot of good poets back in those days.
Chapter 2 is about wartime.
Wartime Burbank. I don't know if any of you are familiar, but there was a famous film at the time to one of those pro-America home front movies called excuse me, Wings for the Eagle. And they held special showings at the Warner Brothers Theater down in LA. They made special stipulations for the swing shift crews and had 1 a.m. showings of the movie. Here you can see some finely dressed gentlemen here.
Gentleman in a t-shirt.
He's got the grease all over him. And
My dad worked the swing shift at Lockheed, by the way.
but if you ever get the opportunity, it's an interesting movie because you actually see the Lockheed plant working inside.
Now, I could not take the entire film and put it on YouTube because that would get me in trouble, but there are excerpts from it on YouTube linked on the Burbankia video website. What do we think about the P-38 Lightning, Mike?
Oh, the P-38 Lightning. It's the most distinctive and our favorite airplane of all time. Nothing else looks quite like it. Anyway, back in July in 2011 for the 100th anniversary, the city had a flyover, or what they called an air parade. And that silver, specifically that one right there, flew over. I took that shot from the top of City Hall, and it was just beautiful to see that thing fly over. And there's nothing like the noise of those twin engines moving.
Lightning's in the Sky. It was a poem written by Technical Sergeant Robert H. Bryson. He was a radio operator gunner aboard a bomber and unescorted flying fortress over North America. This was printed in the October 29th, 1943 Lockheed Vega Star, and I shall now read it to you. This is what your fighting man during World War II thought of the products that we made here in Burbank. Oh, Hetty Lamar is a beautiful gal, and Madeline Carroll is too. But you'll find if you query a different theory amongst any bomber crew. For the loveliest thing of which one could sing this side of the pearly gates is no blonde or brunette of the Hollywood set, but an escort of P-38s. Yes, in days that have passed when the tables were massed with glasses of scotch and champagne, it's quite true that the sight was a thing to delight us, intent on feeling no pain. But no longer the same nowadays in this game when we head north from Messina Straits. Take the sparkling wine every time, just make mine an escort of P-38s. Byron, Shelley, and Keats ran a dozen dead heats describing the view from the hills of the valleys in May when the winds gently sway, an army of bright daffodils. Take the daffodils, Byron, the wildflowers, Shelley. Yours is the myrtle, friend Keats. Just reserve me those cuties, American beauties, an escort of P-38s. Sure, we're braver than hell. On the ground, all is swell. In the air, it's a different story. We sweat out our track through the fighters and flak. We're willing to split up the glory. Well, they wouldn't reject us, so heaven protect us. And until all the shooting abates, give us the courage to fight them. And one other small item, an escort of P-38s. So that's what the common fighting man thought of our P-38s. And you could see Hetty Lamar and Madeline Carroll were indeed.
Early Burbank and then.
Tell us about that picture, Mike.
This is an early picture of Lockheed while they're building the P-38s. Now, if any of you can guess about where this is, you can see that I've written in some things over here. That's where Buena Vista meets Van Owen. The Dome of the Aviator is in the back. That's Buena Vista Street. Here's Lincoln. At that point, Lincoln actually came in. It didn't stop at Empire. Anybody recognize this embankment? What's there today?
Railroad tracks?
No. David's Bridle over in the, the embankment. That is the same embankment. And if you're over there during Christmas, you will notice this tight formation of P-38s here. During Christmas, you'll see the traffic along that road right next to that embankment look about the same. So,
here's an interesting thing that didn't make it into the book because we only discovered this after we had the book published. General Motors design chief Harley Earl, he's generally credited with popularizing the tail fin in American cars during the 50s. Where did he get the idea? He got the idea from World War II fighter aircraft, especially the twin-tailed P-38 Lightning. And there's the evolution of the Cadillac fins. So every time you see a Cadillac, classic Cadillac drive by, think P-38.
here we are. We have, continuing the wartime Burbank, beware of chicken feathers. Are anybody familiar with that they covered Lockheed so that it looked from the air like a farm? Well, one of the things they did, instead of putting dirt up there because it get heavy or something like that, they put chicken feathers and painted them. Every time it rained, all of these cars down here were covered in wet painted chicken feathers.
That's a bit of lore that comes from my father-in-law, who graduated from Burbank High in 1945. As a boy, he worked in the Vega plant.
And he has the coolest P-38 watch you've ever seen, and probably the only one in existence.
Fortress Burbank. Tell us about Fortress Burbank, Mike.
Fortress Burbank was two groups of people, soldiers I should say. The 121st Field Artillery, they formed what was called the Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire started out by Hanson Dam with searchlights and no anti-aircraft at that point, but they would spot them coming in, and then they had concentric circles getting closer and closer to the center being Lockheed. They would protect them, and in by the third ring, they had all of these heavy anti-aircraft guns. If you'll want to have an interesting thought, next time you're in the McCain Bridge pool, remember that's where the gun was. So
this photograph was sent to me by a fellow whose grandfather, Ernie Russello, was visited by these Hollywood starlets. That was one of the treats for the men stationed up in the Verdugo Hills. My favorite here is the abbreviated Marine Corps garb of no less than Donna Reed. That's Donna Reed, dressed as a Marine.
Many of these soldiers often said how hospitable the Burbankers were, and they said they never had to buy a drink or had a meal, and even their barracks were furnished by Burbank people loaning them furniture, and their mascot dog was even from a Burbanker.
Is Greg here tonight?
No, Greg is not here, but
okay.
We're continuing in wartime Burbank. This is a member of the Veterans Committee who graciously allowed us to use his pictures from Vietnam. He was in a field artillery base out there all over the jungles of Vietnam, but he was a proud Burbank resident. Instead of camouflage stuck in the rubber band around his helmet, he had the city of Burbank flag. He knew how to do it. And then here we are, 11,980 miles in the jungles of Vietnam to vacation in beautiful downtown Burbank.
Chapter 3 is what we call the media capital of the world, and believe it or not, that's what Burbank is. We make the case in the book. First National Pictures arrived in 1926. There's a good old-fashioned picture of. They later merged with Warner Brothers, and today we mostly think of it as Warner Brothers, but for quite a while there was a Warner Brothers First National Picture tag on their films. This is an aerial shot that we like because it's from the 1930s. It shows Warner Brothers. But we want to point out something. David Burbank's ranch home was right about there. It's on the back lot of Warner Brothers. And it's only 740 feet from the Los Angeles River, which is the boundary between Los Angeles and Burbank. So we think it's kind of funny that the man who gave Burbank the name was almost not a Burbanker himself. But
and here we have one of my favorite posters. Anybody remember the 80s? Okay, yeah, all right. As long as you remember. This thing was beautifully drawn, and we've recently been able to find this new one that was never used, so it hasn't faded in its color. But Johnny Carson welcomes you to beautiful downtown Burbank.
1981.
Many of these places are long gone. My favorite is the double-decker bus of the London Butcher Shop, if anybody. Best hot roast beef sandwich in town back then. NBC's gone, Lockheed's gone. You can sit here and look at all of the places that are no longer, but you'll find that on the back of our book. book embossed there in full color.
Okay, this is the part of the show where Wes and Mike pretend like we're Johnny Carson and we read zingers that Johnny Carson used to tell about Burbank. And if you could turn up the lights just to thank
There
you.
we go. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, Burbank leads the nation in the number of squirrel suicides.
Burbank was founded by Dr. David Burbank, a dentist. Apparently, he thought it was a great place to have a toothache.
Burbank has an official flag, a deceased crow.
Oh, tough crowd.
Yeah, tough crow. Tough room, tough room.
On New Year's Eve in Burbank, everyone gathers around and watches the mayor drop a ring-ding from the roof of a 7-Eleven. Hi-oh!
Yo! Anyway, Burbank's favorite Italian restaurant is Vinnie Abruzzo's Little Touch of Newark. A table with a view is near the ladies' room where the door is always open.
He did this for decades, but it was great publicity for Burbank. The media capital of the world. Here's a funny story that not everyone is aware of. It's in the book. We all know that Gary Owens introduced the term beautiful downtown Burbank on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. How did he get the job? He got the job this way. George Schlattler, who was the producer of Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, needed an announcer. And they were in the men's room of the Smokehouse. And Gary Owens, with his announcer's voice, he said, "My, the acoustics are good in this room." And George Schlattler said, "Yes, yes, that's the voice I want." And so forever after, he became broadcasting from beautiful downtown Burbank. That's the story, folks.
Chapter 3, the media capital of the world, continues with the Columbia Ranch. Everybody familiar with the Columbia Ranch, now known as Warner's Ranch and everything like that? Anyway, back in the day, they used to film many of the movies that you see in the black and white. Here is Shangri-La. So if you're ever on Hollywood Way or Verdugo and you start feeling really good and healthy and youthful again, you know, because you're very close to Shangri-La.
Shangri-La in Burbank, who knew?
This top corner, though, has been removed, though, for a small mall that they built there.
Walt Disney Studios, obviously a major player in the town. As a matter of fact, they helped out with this library. There's a new construction, 1939. Walt Disney discussing the details of his campus, moved from Hyperion Avenue in Los Angeles here to Burbank.
This is one of our favorite buildings in Burbank. Does anybody know where that is? The brick block building? Burbank Bar and Grill.
Burbank Bar and Grill.
And still there today.
Still there today.
Built in 1888 and is still going. The only thing is that in 1910 they lost the cupola. They had to cut it off due to an earthquake. But we love this shot because here we are. We have this group of guys down here. We call them the Crusty Boys. And we like these guys. They're fun. And we have a close-up up here of these guys.
Apparently there was a
crusty woman. She's all the way over here on the end. She's kind of out of the picture, but we also believe the bench came from a church fire that was just down the road on Angelino in San Fernando.
And there's a detail that shows that the post office was located right there in the corner. This is a blow-up, and there's my favorite guy. He's sitting on a chair which is propped up on the pew, which is stuck in the middle of San Fernando Road. And then there's his friend with the interesting haircut.
And this is, everybody remember the train station? Yeah, long gone unfortunately, but due to fire and homeless people living in it at the time. But this building is very intriguing and you will see it a little bit later.
Believe it or not, we actually had a building in Burbank that looked like a pumpkin, a giant pumpkin. It was called the Pumpkin Building, 1927. There's a shot. It was on Magnolia Boulevard, roughly across from Porto's. It was, during its career, an inn, a bar, a hardware store, a
real
church,
estate.
a real estate business. They just didn't know what to do with this pumpkin.
But everybody who was in there always fell onto hard luck. It was not a place you really wanted to be.
It's an unfortunate site to conduct business.
All right, everybody recognize this one. This is usually everybody's favorite part.
If you want to get a whole lot of response on a Burbank Facebook page, all you need to do is run a picture of the dip at the Five Corners. Does this place bring back happy memories for you? It certainly does me. I used to walk home from school, Burbank High, and I would stop and get a shake there every day. And Gail, who was the gal working there, she was a ballet dancer. And she was the most graceful fast food worker in Burbank. She used to waltz from place to place, and it was so elegant. I miss her. Anyway. When did the Dip close? In the 1980s?
Yes, I think it was early 1980, and then it became a sandwich place, and then it got hit by several cars not making the turn, and they just kind of gave up, and then Costco came, and the rest is history.
Yeah, there was usually a motorcyclist who would fail to make the hard left on a Victory, and he wound up in the glass windows of the Dip.
Chapter 5 is musical Burbank. Later on, you're going to get an opportunity. Everybody on your seat has the same piece of sheet music as up here.
You are going to be expected to sing.
Yes, get your voice, start warming up now. And it's the official song of Burbank, and it has only been sung once in the last 80 years, and that was at our last show. So you are going to get the privilege
later today
of being the next person to sing.
But there's another Burbank official song. Lights up a little bit, please. Thank you. This is Burbank's official song by W.P. Kaufman. It's based on a song during the Civil War called Tramp, 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 the Boys Are Marching. And because I used to do Civil War reenacting, I know the melody. So despite the cold, you're going to hear it now. There's a town in southern Cal that we love just like a pal, where we work and boost and sing and dance and play. There's no other place in sight that can give us more delight, and we're full of pep and ginger when we say, here's the chorus. Bank, 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 we bank on Burbank, bank on Burbank every day. Nestled up against the hills, all our hearts with pride she fills. Yes, we bank on Burbank, and we're here to stay. Thank you. I'll be in town all week.
And here we have continuing Jody Gables. Anybody know who Jody Gable is? She was a Burbank High School student, class of 65. Anyway, Jody Gable's notable thing is she was the first person who was in head of the fan club for the Beach Boys. You've never heard of them, have you? No.
She's the inspiration for the song "Be True to Your School."
"Be True to Your School" is about Burbank High.
The story is she was driving the Beach Boys nuts with her stories about Burbank High, and so she gave Brian Wilson the idea of writing a song about school spirit. Burbank High School, school spirit. And he came up with "Be True to Your School." She stayed connected to her classmates, and she's always stayed true to her school, and we're happy to say. And there she is on her first date with Beach Boy Dennis Wilson, 1962. She was 13, 14, some ridiculously young age, but okay, Mike.
Here is a trivia question. When is the only known recording session where John Lennon and Paul McCartney played together after the breakup of the Beatles? And the obvious question, where did it take place?
Now we're all gathered here to talk about Burbank, so where do you suppose it took place? Yes, here in Burbank.
Here in Burbank. It was done over here. Lennon was producing the album for Harry Nilsson called Pussycats when Paul and Linda McCartney dropped in after the first night of the sessions, a.k.a. the Jim Keltner Fan Club.
He was their drummer.
And anyway, he says they were joined by Stevie Wonder, Harry Nilsson, Jesse Ed Davis, May Pang, Bobby Keys, and producer Ed Freeman for an impromptu jam session. Controlled substances were used. Let this be a warning. Hence the phrase toot.
A toot and a snore in '74. So the Beatles, John and Paul, their last performance was here in Burbank. Chapter 6 looks at Burbank inventors. Now you might know that with industries like Disney and Lockheed, we've had a significant amount of invention take place in this town. Clarence Kelly Johnson, what a man. He was an aeronautics inventor of all aeronautics inventors, two-time Collier Trophy winner. And there he is with Amelia Earhart. The SR-71 was one of his aircraft. The U-2 was another one. The P-38, he worked on the P-38. He was a hod carrier. Does anybody here know what a hod carrier is?
Carry the mortar up to the bricklayers.
Right. My guess is your dad had a lot of muscle. Kelly Johnson was famously strong. When he played golf, he only played with one club that he used for every hole. And he loved to take on the younger engineers at arm wrestling, which he always won. So there's their former hard carrier, who was inventor.
Next we have Maurice Poirier. Very little known, but he at one point in time was a very popular inventor. Came from France, leaving because he saw the handwriting on the wall that the Germans were coming. Get out of town now and take all of my ideas with me. He was into rocketry. He was into jet aircraft. He was into vehicle suspension, armaments. He invented timepieces. He invented cockpit dials for Lockheed. He was all over the place. He has tons of patents. And anyway, you probably never heard of him. He lived on the corner and invented all of this stuff back in the 30s. In 1936, all of your cars that you drove here in probably have independent four-wheel suspension. He invented it on the corner of 3rd and Angelino in 1936.
He was called the 10 ideas per minute man. He was just a very prolific inventor. That's a French magazine called Youth Magazine, and it says the caption is, "Let's all board the interplanetary spacecraft." There he is again. I really like that spacecraft. That's the kind of thing that really got my interest when I was a boy, spacecraft that looked like this. Another thing that he came up with was a scheme whereby he would beam high energy radio waves through the air and transmit power through the air via electromagnetic wave. It was an idea destined to fail for some obvious physical reasons, but that was one of his ideas. And we talked about vehicle suspension. He was a pioneer. These are patents for four-wheel independent suspension. It seemed to be mostly for trucks initially, but that same idea was later used for passenger cars.
Here we have another Burbank inventor who you've probably never heard of, Harper B. Henry. He invented the Azonic language. This is it right here. Can anyone read that? You can probably see why it didn't go so good, for him. Anyway, so he was pretty smart, and he came up with all of these great ideas, but most of them went down.
He was probably too smart for his own good, actually.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about his father, Freedom Hill Henry, and his community of cranks.
Chapter 7, those amazing Burbankers. This is where we look at people who lived in Burbank that maybe weren't ever successful or popular, but were nonetheless notable. This is one of our favorite. Vern Sion. It's hard to imagine a more Burbanker than Vern Sion. This is a man who actually shaved his beard so that it spelled Burbank along the bottom of his face. In the 1951 contest, he won. But the interesting thing about him is he appears in two different photographs. This is one of them. The other one is a rather more famous photograph of he helped build that's Vern Sion over there on the left. That's Mel Keys in the middle, and it was his son who gave us the permission to use this photograph in the book. And that's Volmer Jensen on the right. Volmer Jensen had a production facility in Burbank. That's on Providencia.
Providencia, just below San Fernando.
And in 1964, they built the USS Enterprise for the very first Star Trek show.
Now, anybody have a guess where that ship is today? It's in the Smithsonian. It was in their gift shop for a long time, right in the center in a big glass thing.
I have a joke that you cannot get away from Burbank. I live in Northern Virginia. I was at a yard sale not too long ago. I'm thumbing through records and, 101 strings. Pull it out, turn it around, Burbank, California. We go to the Smithsonian, we go to the gift shop, and there's Volmer Jensen and Vern Sion's Enterprise in the gift store. Can't get away from Burbank.
Continuing with those, Laura Houtling Ingalls. Who remembers Amelia Earhart? Yes. Okay. Who is the woman pilot record holder? You don't know? It's her. Amelia Earhart doesn't even come close to this lady's accomplishments. You don't know of her because of things we'll talk about in a minute, but she, longest flight ever made by a woman at 17,000 miles.
That record stands.
Stands today. And then first solo flight by a woman from North and South America.
That record stands.
First solo flight around South America by man or woman.
That record stands.
First complete flight by a land plane around South America by a man or a woman. Still stands. And first American woman to fly the Andes solo in an open cockpit.
So, she was riding high, she got great publicity, everything was going well for her until. Well, one more. Okay, there she is in Lockheed with her plane with Amelia Earhart. So she was in some good company there. And then World War II came along. She was found to be an unregistered German agent during World War II. Now think about this. She was an aviator who lived in the same town where Lockheed was building P-38s, and they were very concerned about Laura Ingalls. Wore a swastika, doctor asserts. She's a Nazi agent, the jury decided. She denied guilt. The story was she saw herself as a Mata Hari. She wanted to be an exotic spy. She was incensed with the land lease program, didn't approve of it. She was an isolationist. She accepted money from Germany, which is what made her an unlicensed unregistered German agent. Hoover wouldn't give her a job. That annoyed her. And there's one incident where, imagine doing this now, she flew around Washington, D.C., throwing out isolationist leaflets so the congressmen and the people in D.C. Well, she was met by an FCC official when she landed. They suspended her license. Laura Ingalls died in 1967. She was a resident of Country Club Drive. One
One of the ladies who was on the Veterans Committee with me was a wave in World War II, and she lived right next door to her and knew her very well, and has talked to me endless hours about her. Very interesting woman.
Chapter 8 we call Murder and High Crimes in Burbank. And Burbank did see its share of murders and high crimes. Corruption in government. This is former police Chief Elmer Adams. He's inspecting a Tommy gun here, and apparently he wasn't fooling around. You could see the impressive BPD collection of revolvers that were taken in various cases.
Anyway, Elmer was involved in the Mickey Cohen scandals. He is a police chief in Burbank on a salary of about $2,000 a year, had 2 yachts, 2 Cadillacs, and a huge mansion.
Right.
So you can see he was a good guy.
Last night, Mike and I took a drive past 602 Lincoln Street. This was the scene of the 1933 Tom Bay murder. Tom Bay was a Hollywood cowboy star, and he was shot dead by his lover, Alta Lessert, on October 11, 1933. She then shot herself, attempting suicide. This fellow has an interesting history. He got into an argument in Los Angeles at a bar and shot this guy dead. Escaped through the window. He was captured, tried, but acquitted. So he was killed by Alta Lessert. She claimed she was beaten, abused by Bay on prior occasions, a self-defense plea, in other words. The judge ruled insufficient evidence. 1934, she walked. She went free. She died in 1951. One of Burbank's many stories. There she is. Love, anger, death, regret. For the first time since she was arrested for the asserted murder of Tom Bay, her cowboy sweetheart, Mrs. Alta Lessert, went back yesterday to the Burbank home where the tragedy took place. There she is, posing at the box. She refused to enter the house. Mrs. Lessert, pictured here, leaned against the mailbox, bearing her name and that of her lover, Bay.
And here we have the famous Mabel Monahan murder.
Possibly one of the most celebrated Burbank murders.
Yes. It was made into a movie about Barbara Graham. This is Barbara Graham's prison photo here, you know. Anyway, the bottom line is she came out and the movie was a big hit, but her and 2 men were accused of beating Miss Mabel Monahan on a home invasion robbery, beating her severely till she passed away. And they found her and them in another city after they big chase, big BPD, federal agents, everybody was looking for her and they found her, but her story became a very famous movie.
Now, on June the 2nd, 1955, she was taken to San Quentin facility for execution. One of the men in charge of her execution strapped her into the gas chamber, gave her some advice. Barbara, take a good deep breath and it would go easier and quicker for you. And her response was, how the hell would you know? You must admit she's got a point. Now, here's where it gets spooky.
Here is the fun thing. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the ghosts of City Hall. We firmly believe, through our research, I work down here, and I have interviewed and talked to different folks, from custodian to people who actually work in the record center down there. What they did was they took the old jail, they took those doors off, and that's where the city stores its records, is in the jail cells. And anyway, but every now and then someone will catch a glimpse of a woman dressed in period out like that, and she just moves through the place and then disappears when they turn to face her. And then there's another guy who's dressed in a uniform, a soldier's uniform, who appears also in a similar fashion. Out of the corner of your eye, you see him there, and it's not just one, but it's several people who have actually seen these apparitions.
Now, we don't vouch for this. We're just reporting what we've been told, folks.
But the people don't know each other who have seen them.
Chapter 9, this is the part that most people have told me they like the best. This is fun Burbank lore. Burbank Space Capsule of Love at Verdugo Park. This space capsule was a mock-up. It was made by the Weber Corporation, and it was donated to the City Fathers, who put it up in Verdugo Park. And it stayed up there for years, but then it was removed. And the Parks and Rec lady, I asked her, well, why was it removed? And she said, well, we have no idea over the years how many children were conceived in that thing. So that's why, hence, Space Capsule of Love.
It's gone now. One of my favorite photos of all time. This is a picture of a nuclear blast out in the desert where they were testing one of those famous nuclear explosions. The view from where we're looking here is on the Hollywood Hills, looking at the Verdugo Mountains.
Burbank.
And this is Burbank down here. The large light here is Lockheed at night. And this is radiation.
275 air miles away. Now, the fun thing about this was the 23rd of February, 1955. Were you born on the 23rd of February, 1950? Anybody born around about then in Burbank? We don't know, whatever. We used to burn witches here, Mike.
Yeah, I love this shot. Park and Rec used to be a fun department. This is Olive Recreation Diamond 2. If you're, in case you don't notice, it still has the wood fence from when it was the stadium, Major League Baseball stadium practice field. Anyway, here you have your basic Park and Rec people putting together a nice pile of wood. And if you notice, this is a bucket of gasoline. Yeah. Now we're talking. They would not allow us to recreate that for this meeting, though. So we asked out there in Lincoln Park, but they wouldn't let us.
Those pesky kids putting detergent in the fountain in front of City Hall. That's one of the city councilors. What do I do about this? We discussed that in Fun Burbank Lore. This is Mike's part, the ultimate sacrifice. In Chapter 10, we discuss the sacrifice of Burbank veterans who died in the various wars in which the United States took part.
All of these women have the sad camaraderie of losing a son or a daughter. Many people don't know that we actually lost a woman who was a Burbank resident in World War II. And the bottom line here is that we never want to be part of this again. But every year, the Burbank Veterans Committee gets together for our Memorial Day ceremony. We read all of the names of every person who has lost their life in service of Burbank and the United States. And we place a rose on the memorial for every name that is written. And when possible, we have family members who are still living come up and actually place the rose for their deceased relative. And here we have Burbank's Medal of Honor winner. I don't know if you're familiar with him. If you ever get the opportunity to go out to Larry Maxim Park on Pacific Avenue out there, Larry Maxim was a Marine in the Cam Lo District during the Vietnam War. He was a fire control command, and he had seen one of his people when the Viet Cong came through and broke into their perimeter, and they were flooding through, hundreds of them. And the whole base was about to be overrun. Larry relinquished command of his thing, went out to his soldiers and who had been killed out there. He dived onto their machine gun and provided effective fire for over 2 hours by himself after being hit repeatedly by rocket-propelled grenades, small arms fire, and large artillery and hand grenades. And he continued to fire till he could no longer reload the machine gun. He fell down prone, propping up 2 M16s, and continued to fire. And he is credited by single-handedly saving the entire base.
Burbank's only Medal of Honor recipient.
This is the memorial, which has just been, in the past few years, created over at the Memorial Field at Burroughs. The statue was commissioned by the Veterans Committee, and it represents the homecoming. The child being held is not to look boy or girl in either way, but is affectionately embraced by her father, who she hasn't obviously, or he has obviously seen. And it's meant to evoke the homecoming feeling of your father coming home after the war.
And you should feel proud because Burbank has a very pronounced patriotic spirit about its veterans. Now, this is the etc. part. That was Lost Burbank. That gives you a taste of what the book is about. This is just stuff we threw in to make it more fun. This is the etc. part. Photographic stuff not necessarily associated with the book. Look at all of these bands. Kool and the Gang, Lynn Anderson, the Captain and Tennille, Dolly Parton, Frankie Valli, Steely Dan, it goes on, Todd Rundgren, the Incredible String Band, Johnny Winter, Jose Feliciano, Scruggs, Edgar Winter Group, the Starlight Vocal Band, Hall & Oates, Nick Lowe. What do these all performed in Burbank? Does anybody know where? No, I knew you'd say Starlight Bowl. No, the Midnight Special. Remember the Midnight Special?
Was filmed at NBC.
And it's one of the annoying things that this did not make it into the book, because after the book was published, I found out, and I talked to Mike and said, we didn't put anything in about the Midnight Special. Yeah. But anyway, the Midnight Special had all those legendary performances in it. All took place in Burbank at the NBC studios during the 70s. Did anybody ever go to a... Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Corey, we know you did.
So here is a fun thing. You know how tough Burbank people are? We're tough, aren't we? You know, we're a tough kind of people. We're so tough that we put our kids in boxing rings and let them beat each other up. This was a this is Olive Rec, you know, down there. They used to hold regular boxing matches for youth.
It looks like a couple of 10-year-olds or something there with boxing gloves, you know. Wow. Oh, this is a few slides about Lockheed. We like this one because you don't see many Rosie the Riveter pictures in color, but this is one. And I'm sure the photographer must have thought this is going to make a great photograph for Life or Time or whatever it was. So we honor the Rosie Riveter presence in Lockheed. Hey, Mike, why are there planes on? I don't get it.
Does everybody know why the planes are on top of those things out there?
Please tell us you know why there were planes.
Because I cannot count how many times we get an email or a question or a phone call or something saying, Mike, why are the planes on top of those signs down there? And why are they over there? It's becoming lost lore of Burbank that Lockheed was ever here. And, you know, I used to stand at the photo place for team sports over at Olive Rec under the plane, under the F-104. And every year I'd hear somebody say to their kid would say, Mom, what is that plane there for? Oh, it's just decoration.
It's the kind of thing that drives Mike nuts.
And and then, see, and the mother says that, and then I am obliged to correct her.
And Mike's jaws tighten. Can we have the lights back up a little bit, please? All right, this is Freedom Hill Henry. We told you about his son who invented the Azonic language. This is Dad. Dad, if he looks a little piercing, it's because he has a glass eye, okay? Leroy Freedom Hill Henry, 1860-1932. He ran the Freedom Hill Pressery, and it was called Burbank, California, but we think it was in the, there it is up there. We think it was just above the border of Burbank a little bit into, what is that? It's not Van Nuys, it's North Hollywood?
North Hollywood.
North Hollywood. And
the community of cranks.
A convention of cranks. He presided over a bunch of men who got together and they were cranks. So what we'd like to do is he published these things with some of his views on life, and some of them are interesting.
I used to have a good reputation back in Indiana, but when I came west, I left it behind. It was too much trouble to move it around and pay freight on it. And if I should be so unfortunate as to acquire another gilt-edge reputation, I would lock it up in a bank vault for safekeeping while I went out and had a good time doing just as I pleased.
Sometime when I am in the proper mood, I am going to invent a new method of healing. A method more foolish, if possible, than any method known at present. I'm not sure that I am smart enough, or I should say, foolish enough to do it. I would like to see a method tried that was more remote from reason, sense, and science than any present system. Judging from the success of other systems, I think my new system will become very popular and also profitable to the undertaker.
No offense will be taken on this one. Anyway, at present day, there are said to be 3 methods of communicating thoughts. If a person has some thoughts that he wishes to disseminate far and wide and rapidly, he will either telephone or telegraph or tell a woman.
This one's kind of icky. Before getting my glass eye, the 2 empty eyelids looked lean and hungry and lonesome. They looked like 2 hungry jaws with nothing to eat. Or to use a more poetic figure of speech, they look like 2 lips with nothing to kiss, or 2 arms with nothing to hug. They look starved and empty and cheerless. But now that they have a glass eye to love and caress and warm, they look more contented and happier.
He gets worse, by the way. Since I have learned the great advantage of having a glass eye, I am thinking of getting a glass ear and a glass tongue. And then I shall have a complete Christian Science outfit. Then when my friends begin to tell me about the meanness of their neighbors and enemies, I shall close my honest ear and turn my glass ear to them, and I shall hear no evil. With my glass tongue I shall speak no evil. I shall then be harmless and happy as the 3 little terracotta monkeys you have seen in the shops, who could see no evil, hear no evil, or speak no evil.
The difficulty is that my friends do not understand that I am a peculiar crank. Nature has made an entirely different set of laws and regulations for me, just for me alone, and not applicable to any of you. I am governed by a peculiar mystical system, a system that is invisible, intangible, undemonstrable, unprovable, and unbelievable. I am especially protected by the gods, so that no harm can come to me. Nothing ever happens to me but what I deserve. I never get stung unless I go too close to a wasp's nest. I never get sick unless I need to. Nobody is ever unjust to me. Nobody steals anything from me but what I can get along without, and I never lose an eye that I have to have.
He would publish all of this stuff in little brochures and pamphlets, and he apparently had a going business from what they called the Burbank Press.
Burbank Pressery. And here's what it distracts: the usefulness of useless husbands. Do we have any useless husbands in the crowd here? Probably. Opening date, Unimart, Mike.
Yeah, opening day.
1962, Unimart.
All right, does anybody know what Unimart is today?
Fries.
Fries, there we are.
Remember Six Finger Man Alive? How did I only get along with 5? That's where I got my 6 finger from in 19...
I always liked the open atrium there, where they had all those hanging weird designs, you know, and things like that.
I like the falcon in the front there.
Well, yeah, I'd love to have that.
It's bear feeding time in Burbank. Here's John Mars of Burbank, snapped by the camera in the act of throwing a party for his 525-pound California black bear with Zip, the dog. 12/6/1935. That's just these pictures that turn up in Burbank. It's just, here's Hoot Gibson.
Burbank on Parade, one of our favorite subjects. Yeah, we got some Burbank on Parade fans. This was along San Fernando Road when they used to have the parade there, and there's Hoot Gibson, and he's wearing a pistol.
The Lincoln Street manhole debris. Okay, we get these public works photographs, and here are these guys pulling garbage out of a manhole. Who throws a tire down a manhole? But yeah, there
it ended up being like half a car, a whole Model A. They had just taken it apart and stuffed it down into the manhole, and they wondered why the sewer was backing up.
So on the behalf of Burbank Public Works, when you have large things to dispose of them properly. Oh, this is a animated GIF. We like this one. This is Burbank 1928 and now. So you could see in 1928 it wasn't anywhere in the city. Look at all that vast open space.
The city's IT department, GIS division, will sit here. They took these pictures were individual little pictures. There were 400 of them. I want to know who the guy in the plane was flying over, shooting these shots, 400 of them, over the entire city and into halfway into Glendale.
Back then, when technology
In
isn't what it is
1928,
today.
and they're beautiful. You can, if you go onto the city's GIS site, which this map is published there, you can look right down on top of Jeffrey's Barn and all of the great places that were built in 28. But good stuff.
We've even included the proverbial train wreck. If you've lived in Burbank at any time, you've seen a train wreck. Here's the one from December 1966 on the Burbank overpass.
Taken from the Burbank Boulevard Bridge.
Anybody know where this is?
Reservoir.
Reservoir. Where?
Grand Park.
Palm Park.
Palm Park. This is Palm Park. When you play baseball,
Look at the scale. There's a 6-foot man approximately. There's a lot of water in there.
when you play baseball, you're up above that concrete up there. You know, it's got grass on it, looks like a normal field, but underneath you is what you're drinking tomorrow.
We take you where you've never been. We like this one. This is bide their time to buy their time. You know, you could see some news guy spent the night thinking of that one. There was a shortage of clocks during World War II, and these are people who were queuing up in front of a jewelry store on San Fernando Road to buy alarm clocks. All clocks were sold in less than an hour. Some anxious buyers waited outside the store all night to be sure they'd stand first in line, 1943.
There's a companion picture to this one showing the father and daughter standing right at the door, and the father's got a chair and he's like, passed out on the, leaning against the door.
These are Ansel Adams photos of a Lockheed swing shift dance, 1942. Why do you suppose he aimed his camera in this direction?
It's not Yosemite.
I think it was probably the young leggy lass with the nylons there. No, silk stockings. They were silk back then, weren't they? And then there's Jane Mansfield and the Burbank firefighters from 1955. Now, the thing is funny is they look like twins. They look like the same guys grinning at Jane Mansfield. All right, here, this is the Bellamy Salute, 1929. When Mike sent me this photograph, he captioned it, "This just doesn't look good."
We've got, and this is in the Burbank High School auditorium, by the way.
Everybody is saluting the flag like that. That was called the Bellamy Salute.
And you notice the time frame here, it didn't last much longer.
Yeah,
all of a sudden, the hand over the heart becomes very popular.
In 1942,
you can guess
the
why.
U.S. government changed things. Betty Baker in Magnolia Park, 1928. I love this Homeric, this classical pose. Here she looks like she's on a chariot, you know, behind it. And then you've got this guy standing. Oh, look at that.
These were promotional pictures with actresses of the time for building houses in Magnolia Park. There's also another one where the girl is, she's dressed to the nines with a beautiful hat, and she's walking all these little children that look like Spanky and our gang across the street.
How do you pronounce that name? Lutke?
Lutke.
We like this picture because it looks like something you'd see in a Wild West movie from, you know, like Gunsmoke or something, but that's Burbank.
That was on San Fernando Road, right about Olive.
And there's the Empire China Company, looking a little worse for wear, actually.
This is when Lockheed started to move in and take over the Empire China Company. You can see they've started to make some changes, throwing pieces of the roof off and everything, but that's where, can anybody tell me where this building was or what was there now? You've probably eaten there. This is Wendy's. That's exactly where Wendy's is today.
Homer Garrett's Why Not Twirlers, Burbank on Parade, 1952. Hey, Why Not Twirlers, right? Yeah. Homer Garrett. I don't know who Homer Garrett was. I don't know who but it's just one of those Burbank things that they did back in the 50s, San Fernando Road.
Here's another thing that we did back in the day. We used to turn the Golden Mall into a place where we would bring in Marines and do nice things for them, have the girls from Burbank High walk them up and down, introduce them into the shops and things like this. And this was a Sin Globe place for the Navy and Marines where they would show recruiting kind of films.
Has anybody in this crowd seen a theater in a structure like this in Burbank? No. No, okay. Lost lore. The Fun Jump next to Cornell Theater, 1961. We like this one, the Fun Jump. Okay, so you've got all these holes in the ground, And what do you think they put over the holes? Trampolines, right? And so you've got kids bouncing on trampolines next to...
Didn't last too long.
Didn't last too long for perhaps
We're trying to
obvious
figure out
reasons.
how many lawsuits came from this
Yeah,
one.
concussions. Who's that?
Does anybody know this and what occasion it is?
Debbie Reynolds. That's Franny Reynolds, Miss Burbank of 1948.
On the occasion of the first opening of the Verdugo pool. And they've since rebuilt the pool and reopened it again. But they didn't have Debbie come in that suit this time.
And we end the slideshow. There's going to be a video part. We end the slideshow with this great photo of, this is our favorite thing, the street sweeper on San Fernando Road, picking up after the horses.
How would you like to have that city job?
There's a great city job, huh? Okay, what time is it, Mike?
5 o'clock.
All right. So, you will be expected to sing. Okay, first of all, we plug the book.
Way out west, I built a nest in a spot that's nature surely blessed. 'Tis the face I love the best, everywhere sunbeams rest, in the valley neath the mountain crest. I'll never stray far away, for there's peace and rest both night and day. Soft breezes sway, flowers by the way, and even all the songbirds seem to say, in Burbank, Burbank, way out west in Burbank, California, I want to warn ya, don't let your footsteps stray when you start to come this way, and you will surely stay until the judgment day. In Burbank, Burbank, there's no place on earth that could be fairer. That's no error. There's a happy throng, just 10,000 strong. In Burbank town, you can't go wrong.
Okay, turn up the lights, please.
Now we're going to sing.
Now we sing it.
If you can either follow along, just a little brief on the magazine there that you've got. It was published by the Chamber of Commerce to bring people into Burbank, and they wrote this song to entice people. Everybody ready? Here we go.
Here we go.
Way out west, I've built a nest in a spot that nature surely blessed. It's the place I love the best, everywhere sunbeams rest, in the valley neath the mountain crest. I'll never stray far away, 'cause there's peace and rest both night and day. Soft breezes sway, flowers by the way, and even all the songbirds seem to say, we'll bring it home in Burbank, Burbank, way out west in Burbank, California. I want to warn ya, don't let let your footsteps stray when you start to come this way. You will surely stay until the judgment day in Burbank, Burbank. There's no place on earth that could be fairer. That's no error. There's a happy throng, just 10,000 strong. In Burbank town, you can't go wrong. Give yourself a hand.